I'm George McCranie, serious injury attorney with offices in Douglas and Valdosta, Georgia. Today I wanted to talk about if you've been injured using a rideshare company service such as Uber or Lyft. And basically, can you file a lawsuit in Georgia? Now, the number of Uber and Lyft drivers and rideshare company drivers has grown tremendously in Georgia in the last few years. And so has the number of car accidents and vehicle accidents that they've either caused or been involved in, okay? And these Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are out there all the time, so it's understandable there's going to be accidents involving those rideshare company drivers. Now, let's talk about three different situations that involve rideshare drivers, okay? But first, what you need to understand is that Georgia law requires rideshare companies to have really great insurance coverage when their drivers are using their app and they're providing services to their customers or to their passengers, okay? Now, let's talk about the first situation where the rideshare driver, the Uber or Lyft, and I'm just using those generally. There may be a lot of other companies out there, but those are two major ones I'm aware of. Now, if they're driving, if the Uber or Lyft driver is, an actual driver, they've been certified in their own and the roles of Uber or Lyft or the rideshare company, but they're driving for their own personal use of their vehicle. They're not using the rideshare app, so they aren't, as my dad would say, on the clock, okay? Now, if they're not on the clock and they're in an accident, then the only insurance involved in their case is their personal insurance for their vehicle, okay? The rideshare company's insurance is not involved because the person isn't actively working and as a rideshare driver. So basically, if they're not on the clock using that app or taking somebody back into, then their own personal insurance will apply. All right. Now let's say the second situation. You got a Uber driver that has the rideshare app on his phone turned on, but hasn't accepted a ride request. Now, Georgia law requires that rideshare companies insure and cover the vehicle with a mandatory $100,000 liability policy and a $100,000 uninsured motorist coverage, okay? Now that's if they just got their app turned on, all right? They're kind of on the clock. All right, now the third instance, and this is where the most insurance is involved and the most insurance coverage is involved, and it's mandated by the state. Let's say the Uber driver is using their app on their phone, has accepted a passenger's ride request, and this covers now from the time they accept the passenger, they're using the app, they accept the passenger's ride request, to the pickup of the passenger, while they drive the passenger where they're going, and the drop-off. All right, all this covers under the rideshare mandatory insurance, okay? Now, this is the situation that has the most insurance coverage. Georgia mandates that these rideshare companies have $1 million in liability and $1 million in uninsured motorist coverage, okay? So if you're involved in an accident, there's a lot of insurance out there that you can use to cover your expenses and your pain and suffering and everything that's there, okay? So if you've been involved in an accident with an Uber driver, there's a lot of insurance out there that should be able to help you, okay? Now, the way it works is we know that Georgia mandates certain amounts of insurance coverage, okay? So if they're just using their app, Georgia mandates $100,000 for liability and for uninsured motorists. All right, if they're using the app and they pick you up and they're driving you wherever you're going and during the ride and at the drop-off at destination, then Georgia law requires $1 million of liability and $1 million of uninsured motorist coverage. All right, but now here's the issue: can you sue, let's say Uber or Lyft, if you're involved in an accident? Here's the thing: Georgia has some pretty restrictive case law that prevents, for example, Georgia cab companies, all right? And because what's called the independent contractor defense, all right, it prevents people from suing cab companies, and it kind of works the same way with these rideshare companies. Now, usually most cab companies avoid liability in accident suits because in the case law here in Georgia, basically the suits that go against bad cab drivers basically get dismissed because the defense is, look, the cab company doesn't control that cab driver. That cab driver can accept or deny anybody, any ride that they want to pick up. They don't have to stop and pick somebody up. So therefore, they're an independent contractor, and that defense usually helps the cab companies. Well, it's the same thing with these rideshare companies. And if you look at the description the rideshare companies have, they will say that they're not a cab company. They don't provide transportation. They just provide communication between you, the person that wants a ride, and the person that wants to give you a ride. That they're not a transportation company, and that the person that's working for Uber or working for Lyft can accept and say, hey, I'll give that person a ride, or say, no, I don't really want to give that person a ride. So they will defend and say that they're independent contractors. So it can be extremely hard to sue Uber or Lyft or rideshare companies in Georgia. Now, there may be other ways to bring a suit against them. That's possible, but it's difficult using the standard activities and standard way to go about it. Okay, but there may be other ways. If you've got a question about this, feel free to give us a call. You can reach us at 833-927-6227, or you can reach us online at McCranielawfirm.com. Now, if you have a question, if you've been injured, you got a family or friend that's been injured, and you'd like a copy of my book, After the Crash, feel free to give us a call, 833-927-6227. We'll be glad to send you a copy absolutely free. As long as publishers got them, we will send them to you. And the book goes through how an accident case works its way here in Georgia, what happens. It gives plenty of examples. But here's the thing, as great as that book is, it doesn't take the place of an experienced serious injury attorney. So anytime that you're injured in an accident, my advice is find the best, most experienced serious injury attorney that you can, and go talk with them to find out if they can help you with their case, and certainly hope they can. And if you've been injured using a rideshare company like Uber or Lyft, feel free to give us a call. We'll be able to help you with that case, give you all the information that you need. I'm George McCranie, serious injury attorney with offices in Douglas and Valdosta, Georgia. If you got any questions about an Uber or a Lyft or a rideshare company and you've been injured, or you're a driver that's been injured, feel free to give us a call. We'll be glad to help you.